Hi, shalom everyone over here. Just got a l'chaim over here because it happens to be YUD TET KISLEV today. Very key date in the Jewish calendar, a very key date in CHASSIDUT in general over here. So I think it's important to have a bit of a l'chaim and a bit of just a drop of red wine and to speak over a few key aspects within regards to this specific date, which is very much celebrated. I think tonight in Jerusalem there was, or all over Israel, there was various different extravaganzas with different Torah talks and different music in of itself and celebration in of its own right. So why is the 19th of Kislev a key date? It's also known as YUD TET KISLEV. I think some communities will call it YUD TET KISLEV. Obviously, the way you pronounce the Tet itself, the number 9 itself on the Hebrew calendar, but be it as it may, it's a day celebrated from all Jewish people, especially, let's say, Hasidic Jewish people from the Chassidut community. It's a Yom Hilula. A Hilula is an anniversary of a passing of of the famous Magid of Mezrich, who was a successor of the famous great rabbi, the Baal Shem Tov, who was the founder, you could argue, of Chassidut. I think he died in the year 1772, which we're talking about 253 years ago, if I'm not mistakenly. And what's more significant also about this date, especially within the regards to the Chabad movement, it's a date of the liberation of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi from prison. This was in 26 years after this, in the year 1798, respectively. Now, I've already said a blessing on this wine already because I did drink a little bit also beforehand. So let's talk a few key dates within regards to this in of itself. Now, the Magid Mezrich was a really great rabbi in of itself. We're going to speak about him in due course. We'll talk about that. But the liberation of Rabbi Shneur Zalman. So there was imprisonment of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi. I think he was the first, let's just say, rabbi of Chabad, also known as Alter Rebbe you could say in Yiddish terminology. It occurred against the backdrop, let's say, of intense conflict between Chassidim and Mitnagdim. These were opponents of Chassidim in itself. And come at the end of 1796, the tenure, the seminal work, let's just say, in Chabad Hasidut was completed. And the book was received joyously by, let's say, the Chassidut community in Vilna, one of the great centers, let's say, of the Mitnagdim. And the Mitnagdim were disturbed, let's say, by this development and subjugated the Chassidim, unfortunately, to, let's say, the opposite of to celebration and maybe wrongdoings. Now, following the passing of the famous Gaon of Vilna, the genius of Vilna, this was on October the 9th in the year 1797, I think it was in Sukkot of that year, a rumor would spread among, let's say, grieving admirers that the Chassidim were, exaggerating their Simchat Beit HaShoeva, the festivities at that point in time, in the joy, God forbid, over this, let's just say, person, a great person in himself, but someone they didn't agree with. Let's just use that terminology. In response, extreme Mitnagdim renewed persecutions against the Hasidim at that point in time, and in defense, the Hasidim appealed to the Russian authorities to limit the authorities of the community council, which was oppressing them, and they successfully curtailed the council's activities. Let's say this anger or frustration from this defeat likely impelled the Mitnagdim to, let's say, retaliate, and they informed against Rabbi Shneur Zalman at that point in time. And the choice to target Rabbi Shneur Zalman specifically was due to the fact that many great, let's say, Hasidim in Vilna were connected to him at that point in time. So we're just talking, I'm just using actually Wikipedia as a source over here within regards to that. So there were, I think, at the end, I think the Tsar, or Tsar, you could pronounce it different ways, ordered an investigation on a specific letter, and the government, or the governor of White Russia, received the order to arrest the famous great Rabbi Shneur Zalman on September the 15th, 1798. He was sent, along with confiscated books and papers, to St. Petersburg. By the first week of October 1798, 22 additional Hasidim who were prominent in the community were arrested as well. And I think on the way at that point in time to St. Petersburg, Rabbi Shneur Zalman requested to have a carriage taking him stop for Shabbat. And I think after refusing at that point in time, a series of mysterious mishaps occurred, convincing the driver to stop to respect the wishes over there. And the Chassidut community immediately mobilized to lobby the government, raise money, and take care of internal affairs during Rabbi Shneur Zalman's imprisonment. Let's say the interrogations would follow on three main topics: whether, let's say, the Hasidim was a new religion, context with revolutionary elements, and sending money abroad. In his defense, Rabbi Shneur Zalman made various key arguments. Hasidism is not a new religion. He argued Chassidut was merely a restoration of ancient customs, emphasizing tefillot, prayer, with intention in the heart, let's say, mitkaven libo, which he claimed had been neglected due to different reasons. And on finances, he fervently denied receiving, let's say, monies maybe that wasn't necessarily kosher, detailing various modest sources of income, which included his wife's tavern and grain businesses and stipend, let's just say, in of itself. And I think on foreign connections, he explained that the money that was sent to the land of Israel was a small part of widespread ancient fundraising effort by emissaries, obviously Shlochei Rabbanan, as they say in those days, claiming his role was limited, let's say, to issuing request letters. Now, there was various different stories chronicled over during his imprisonment. Some stories were told. I think in one account, the Tsar visited the great Rabbi Shneur Zalman. He was dressed as an investigator in the place he was, at which point Rabbi Shneur Zalman stood up to honor the Tsar, impressing him greatly and convincing him of his innocence. Another story is told. Let's just say they asked the Rabbi Shneur Zalman about the meaning of God's question to Adam Harishon after eating from the tree of knowledge, the Etz HaDa'at. Where are you? As we learn about in Bereshit in chapter 3, verse number 9. After giving a simple understanding, Rabbi Shneur Zalman interpreted the query to be a question to each person at all times. What are you holding in life? What are your accomplishments, let's just say? And this would greatly impress this person that was asking. Let's say the Chassidut, the law, tells us that the spirits of the famous Maggid of Mezrich and the Baal Shem Tov, they would come to visit Rabbi Shneur Zalman at that point in time when he was let's just say, solitude at that point in time. Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson is reputed to have once visited the cell when he was in St. Petersburg in the summer of 1911. And when he returned, his father, Rabbi Shalom Dober Schneerson, the fifth Chabad Rebbe, asked him if this, let's say, this cell, this room itself, had enough room for three people, which implies that Rabbi Shalom Dober believed that they had appeared as souls in bodies at that point in time. He was released eventually, and there was a detailed summary, let's say, of this queries that went on, including Rabbi Shneur Zalman's defense. It was presented to the Tsar, although the local governors had found, let's say, no specific concrete evidence of criminal activity. They would continue harboring suspicions, and the Tsar, let's say, lacking incriminating evidence, acted in obedience to justice and common sense. And come what, November the 16th, 1798, the Tsar ordered that Rabbi Shneur Zalman and all arrested Hasidim must be freed. Orders were subsequently sent to the governors to release all detainees, though they were directed to keep them under surveillance. And on November the 27th, 19th of Kislev, Rabbi Shneur Zalman was released, but was mistakenly brought to the house of a Mitnagid at that point in time. This man would, let's say nasty things for several hours before the Hasidim found him that night on the 20th of Kislev. And the Hasidim wanted, let's just say, to approach on the Mitnaged, but Rabbi Shneur Zalman discouraged them. The day Rabbi Shneur Zalman was released, the 19th of Kislev, YUD TET KISLEV, was the anniversary of the passing of his teacher, the great Rabbi, the Maggid of Mezrich. And in a letter, he lent great significance to the day, considering it a holiday for anyone who followed the path of the Baal Shem Tov, the great Rabbi. He attributed the success to the merit of fundraising for the Holy Land. Following his release, Rabbi Shneur Zalman wrote to the great Hasidim, let's say, urging restraint, discouraging, let's say, statements, and about other great rabbis at that point in time. And the date of his release from prison, 19th to 20th of Kislev, was, let's say, when he left the Mitnagid's house. It's celebrated for many Hasidim, many Jewish people, especially Chabad Hasidim, as a festival of redemption. Various observances are made on this day. There's festive meals are held. There's good resolutions, let's say, that strengthen Torah study, spread Chassidut, for example, in a brotherly manner. And it's customary, according to some communities, to split all 63 tractates of the Gemara, the Talmud, amongst community members. I think Tachnun is not recited in many congregations. The last verse of Psalm 55, "He has redeemed my soul in peace," are traditionally sung on this day. These verses are, let's say, a reference to the experience by the great Alter Rebbe on this day, Rabbi Shneur Zalman. "Whoever participates in my celebration will merit to see nachat from his descendants." The day is also marked by many other non-Chabad Hasidic groups. Also, you can see celebrations everywhere. Now, other significant events will come at that point in time. I think Rabbi Yaakov of Marvej, the Korabel, he was a 12th century Tosafist and a Kabbalist who wrote a response from heaven in which he recorded halachic Jewish legal, let's say, response he had heard from heaven after discussing the concept that one should study Torah only after immersing in the mikveh, being a tovel in the mikveh. He describes YUD TET KISLEV, 19th of Kislev, as a day that will herald good tidings. Now, for example, 19th of Kislev in 1744, considered to mark the day Rabbi Shneur Zalman was conceived, apparently. He was born exactly 9 months later on the 18th of Elul. 19th Kislev, 1772, the Magid of Mezrich, Rabbi Dov Ber, the Alter Rebbe's teacher, successor to the Baal Shem Tov, would pass away on this day. 19th of Kislev, 1809, it was the birth date of the Alter Rebbe of the Hasidic dynasty, Zeichlin, Rabbi Shmuel Abba. It was celebrated as a birth date of the dynasty. Let's say, unfortunately, 95% of its followers were murdered in the Holocaust. And in 19th Kislev 2011, I think was a date when the Iraq war ended. And Kamot also as another tidbit. I don't know how much. Very interesting. U.S. President, I was about to say Rabbi, but it wasn't. Donald Trump pronounced Jerusalem as capital of the state of Israel, Medinat Israel, and that U.S. embassy would be relocated to that city. So YUD TET KISLEV, on many fronts, let's say, is a glorious state in itself. We're going to do on another channel a tidbit with regards to famous Rabbi Magid Mezrich in due course. He was known as Rabbi Dov Ber, if I'm not mistaken, Rabbi Dov Ber, Avram of Mezrich. Let's just say something about him for just 1 minute in himself. He passed away in 1772, if I'm not mistaken, in 1976, and was a very, very great rabbi of his time. There's a lot we can say within regards to him. And it's also known, 19th of Kislev in himself, he had a Chassidut, let's say leadership in of its own right, and in its own way. So we're going to speak about him in a separate video. But I think on that note, let's celebrate tonight when YUD TET KISLEV, whatever community we're in, let's appreciate the date in of itself. And l'chaim and Bezrat Hashem, good things for all of Am Yisrael and for the whole world. So take care and have a meaningful day, friends.